I recently, about a month or a month and a half ago, I saw a quote with some of you may be familiar with, and it goes that knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in fruit salad. And that resonated with me because after having worked in social innovation, social entrepreneurship for a good long time and worked with my team, our organization and I believe our work and what we focus on should really be much more about teaching from our own experiences. And it's experience that takes that knowledge and gets you to wisdom. And so when Shini reached out to me about a month and a half ago and asked if I would like to come here and talk about transcending limitations, I thought, well, that's perfect. That's what I do. That's what we try to do for a living, is try to help marginalized and impoverished and vulnerable populations transcend their own limitations to create better lives for themselves and their families and their communities. And maybe it's an opportunity to share some of our lessons learned and experiences to help other people who are focused in this space, and particularly students who are getting up and getting started. But then as I sat back and I thought about it, I thought, transcending limitations, oh shit, that's really broad. What exactly am I going to talk about? And following that, I went to Nicaragua to work with our team, and we were doing some consulting work with social enterprises, with Deloitte. And I got on the plane to come back to the US, and I made the total rookie mistake. My iPhone wasn't charged, I didn't have a book, and I didn't have headphones. Yeah, and I wasn't tired, so I couldn't sleep. So which means I was pretty much resigned to watching reruns of Everybody Loves Raymond without any sound, or reading Sky Magazine. So I went for Sky Magazine. I had my computer, but given my height and given how the space keeps shrinking, the only way I can work on my computer is if I do like semi-fetal position and pterodactyl arms, and then bend my head for when it's a V when the person leans back, so that doesn't work very well. So I picked up Sky Magazine and I read about how some celebrity really likes Atlanta, and how I could get my teeth cleaned, and how I could go out to lunch on a date. And then I got to this part that said brain teasers. And there was this little brain teaser that said, Jim does a job in 5 hours, and Mike does the job in 2 hours. If they work together, how long will it take them to do the job? And the first thing I thought, because I have my social entrepreneurship brain on, which is very difficult to turn off when you do this, I thought, well, why is it these two guys? Right? That's very Pan Am, that's very TWA, right? Shouldn't it be like Ling and Mohammed, or Maria and Vivek? So that aside, the second part I got to was, I don't know, right? And not because I don't understand the math necessarily, but when I think about it and I think about problem solving and I think about social innovation, I don't think about abundance and productivity. Right? My question, and what comes to my mind, is, well, what if they're both digging a well and they actually only have one shovel? Right? It doesn't mean that working together they're going to be necessarily more productive in a linear way. Right? Social innovation says, what are our limitations? How do we work within those limitations? And how do we not make it take longer, but actually maybe there's a way where they can work together, figure out a way to work with one shovel, get other community members together, and maybe actually dig the well faster. But the point is, I don't know. Right? And not to extrapolate too much from an innocuous brain teaser in Sky Magazine, right? But that's really what this is all about when we think about social innovation. It's about, we need to embrace limitations. If I think about my work and what we do and the types of environments that we work with, well, we work with communities. And if you think about water and the scarcity of water, you have communities throughout the world that you have a family and it's rainy season and they're able to access water. But then dry season's coming, and you know that the well's going to dry up. And maybe there's a river nearby and only a forest, and they're going to have 4 months where they don't have enough water. What are they going to have to do? They have to embrace the limitations and come up with some type of an innovation. But it's not just about communities. If you think water, extrapolate more, look at nationally, look at California. The drought that's been going on in California. We have to understand and embrace those limitations. We just can't wish and hope that more rain is going to come someday. That's not going to solve our problems. And even if we look at globally, look at all the horrific consequences of what's going on in Syria today. Many social scientists would say that's actually the result of a severe drought that happened between 2006 and 2009, which caused 1.5 million people to move to the cities and put more stress on the social structures and caused more unrest. Right? So these aren't just local problems. These aren't community problems. They're not just national problems. They're global problems. And it's not just about making things better. It's about working really hard to make sure things don't get worse. So I'd like to talk about embracing limitation for social innovation, and also just with the understanding that limitation isn't constraint, limitation is liberation. It's what helps us come up with new ideas, and it's certainly not a new idea in and of itself. Obviously, innovation has gotten us to where we are today. If you look at just around us, right, I was using Post-it notes the other day. Everybody knows the story of 3M. They were looking for an adhesive, and it wasn't strong enough, and they kept putting it on and putting it on. They didn't abandon it and say, forget it doesn't work. They said, how can we pivot and create something else? I live in New York City. The big thing outside of our front door right now is City Bike. We have a bike sharing program. In social innovation, maybe you take something that's old, a bicycle, and you repurpose it for something new when you have a new way of addressing it. Right? Limitations on public transport, how do we do something new? If you look at the sharing economy now, Airbnb, right? It's all about how do we leverage infrastructure that's already there, or social innovation in particular. If you look at microfinance and what Muhammad Yunus developed, women couldn't take out small loans because they didn't have a collateral. They were limited. Okay, well, how do they use the solidarity groups that they had already formed and use that as collateral so they could support each other? So what I want to focus on is I have 5 things that are critical for social innovation that we all know, but as well the traps that we fall into when we don't limit ourselves and we don't think in ways that embrace the limitations. So the first thing is we all know that if you want to innovate and you want to create change and be a social innovator, you need to have confidence. You need to have belief in yourself. You need to have a can-do attitude. But unfortunately, when we don't limit ourselves, we fall into a trap. And that's that we think we know too much oftentimes, or we think we can do too much. That's a natural thing. You come up with this great idea, you have great passion, you want to get out there, maybe you've studied a lot, maybe you've done a lot of research. Right? But the real critical thing to social innovation is understanding that we need to learn more from other people. The only way that it really happens and works effectively is when we engage with communities. You may have a great idea, but that's beta version. You got to get to 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 10.0. The only way that you do that is to work with communities. And certainly in our case, any innovation that we've designed just started with us, but it was the community members and the local women and the local organizations that helped us to modify and make it better. As well, we tend to think we can do it all ourselves. Right? Everybody wants to start their own new organization. Right? We have enough organizations. Right? The key is that this is a collaborative art. We need to figure out how to work together. So how do we check that? Well, we have to be, as innovators, we have to be self-aware and understand our limitations for any type of entrepreneurship. That's the key to success. And as well, we have to be humble as an organization. When we're self-aware, that helps us to understand what our weakness is and find other team members who help us gain strengths within what we're doing. It helps us to go out and engage with community members and treat folks as co-collaborators where they feel a sense of ownership, and that's when things really happen, and that's when you really learn. As well, organizational humility, we know that we can't create organizations, no matter what you're doing, that's going to change all the problems in the world. Right? The key is that you have to start off and begin with direct service, which is typically what you do to learn how to work, but then you have to create partners, and then you have to disseminate, and you have to diffuse that innovation. Right? It's only through understanding it's only through becoming self-aware and being humble that we start to design from the beginning how we're going to be able to do that. The second thing that we have to do is obviously we need to leverage the resources that we have on hand in other organizations. But there are 2 traps that we fall into there when we don't limit ourselves. If you think about, we've got Christmas coming up. And if you think about your aunt, your daughter, your sister, whomever, gives you this really ugly sweater, Right? Now, I know ugly sweaters are like the big in thing right now, but this is an extremely ugly sweater. Right? What do you say when she gives you that sweater? Thank you. Right? And then you go away and you never use it. Right? And maybe she calls and she talks, how do you like my sweater? What do you say? I love it. It's great. Thank you so much. Right? Well, think about oftentimes with our abundance of resources what we do, and we donate things to communities. Right? We donate these big, like 1970s glasses. Right? You walk into a community and you meet a low-income person in a marginalized community. You say, hey, would you like these glasses for free? What do they say? Thank you. Right? And then you walk away and you feel like you did this amazing, wonderful job. Good for me. And they walk away and they never use the glasses. Right? So that's a problem of abundance. We need to limit ourselves. We can't just use things because we have them. We can't be input driven. And the second time is we do have to scale with organizations. But number one is sometimes we go too fast. We don't limit ourselves. We have this saying, if you have to date before you get married, you have to learn how to work together. You have to learn if these are appropriate relationships and how you can build upon them. But the second thing as well is when you work through organizations, which is critical, they become the intermediary. And oftentimes what you need to do after that is make sure that you're measuring things in the right way, right? Because you become out of the loop. So the keys to success, when we look at that, is we need to make sure that we keep the ends in mind. It's not about people having things. It's about, are they using them? Is there a direct impact, and is it effectuating a change in their lives? Measure the right things. Measure getting to the end. The third thing we need to know, we know is that we need to offer choice and opportunities to people. Right? Two traps that we fall into. Number one is when we try to do too much at the same time. I've had the opportunity to judge social venture competitions, and so oftentimes what I see is somebody says, I'm going to create a homeless shelter, and it's going to be a soup kitchen, we're going to put a training center, and they're going to weave artisan products, and that's going to help to support the local marginalized community which is suffering from some disease, and it's just too much. I think of this as sort of the space shuttle challenge, the space shuttle problem. If you look at the space shuttle, if you wanted to get satellites into space, you would use a booster rocket system. You wouldn't have a ship stuck on the side. And if you wanted to get man into space, you wouldn't have a big cargo bay that had to carry things up. So oftentimes when we combine things with the best of intentions, best case scenario, we create inefficiencies and we don't have quality. Worst case scenario, we create a house of cards where that interdependence actually destroys both things at the same time. And the second part is what I would call the diner menu challenge, the diner menu problem. Right? If you look at a menu at a diner, what does it have? 100 things on it. Right? In our best intentions, we want to offer communities as many possible solutions. We want to work in as many possible ways together. Right? But what happens when you have a long list of things? And some researchers at Columbia and Stanford have done some really great research on this. Number one is if you offer too many things, you don't pick anything. Right? It's choice overload. So if you offer too many things to communities, you don't picking things. Yeah? People feel paralyzed. The second thing is even if you do pick something, you have buyer's remorse. Well, maybe I should have gotten the other thing, so you don't use what you have. And the third thing is what I would say is I'll never order the fresh fish off of the diner menu. Right? Because there's a problem with quality. Yeah. How many people actually have ordered the fish? How fresh is that fish on the diner menu if there are 100 other things on the menu? So you can't do all of these things and do them well. Okay? So what do? Start with one or two things and do it well and build from there. You learn from that process, and then you learn how many things and what are the right things to be working with communities. The fourth thing is we know we need to rally the troops, and this is about messaging. Yeah? We need to rally people to our cause internally and externally. But one of the traps that we fall into is that although we need our BHAGs, our big hairy ass goals, and we need to articulate those, they can be a challenge. If you think of just end global poverty, what's the challenge when we focus on ending global poverty? Well, number one, poverty is a symptom, not a problem. So we're addressing the right things. But the second thing, it's intimidating. What do I do about that? It's difficult to engage people. Right? So if you look at how great organizations focus on this, it's finding symbolic, humanizing stories that are symbolic of the cause and symbolic what you're trying to achieve with your BHAG. If you look at, for example, recently with Malala, right? Or if you look at Rosa Parks, or if you look at the wildlife protection movement has been great with this. Years ago, I don't know if anybody ever got the National Geographics with the whale sounds in them. I'm dating myself. Right? What did it do? It humanized whales. They were speaking to each other. And then you take that and you focus on other areas of wildlife protection, or even just recently, agree with it or not, but the whole decision around the Keystone. Right? Keystone isn't going to destroy the environment in and of itself, but it garners people's imaginations, it garners people's thoughts, it garners people's focus around the issue. And then that helps you to address your larger issue. And the fifth and final part is that we know that we need to find new resources. Limitation isn't, I'm not saying that limitation is a virtue, I'm saying that it's a reality. We do need to develop and find new resources. But the trap that we fall into is what I would say is the paralysis of if I just had one more thing. And we run into this with our team, and you see it all the time, and it's our natural human tendency. That community is really far away. If we just had a truck, right? If we just had 2 more people to work on our team, if we just had a little bit more money, then we could do it. But what happens if you just need the one more thing? And even if you get the one more thing, then you need the other one more thing. So the point is, work with what you got. It is what it is. And from that come 3 great outcomes. Number 1, maybe it's enough, and you can solve the problem with what you have. Number 2, it's only through figuring out what you really have and how you can work with it that you find out not what you want, but what you need. And that's how you realize what the resources are to help your social innovation. And the third thing is after you've actually gone through that process of critical thinking and worked hard at it, if you want to engage investors or donors or other parties, they can see that you've gone through the process and worked the problem hard, and they'll be much more apt and much more willing to support you for the resources that you do need. So I'd like to close with 2, if I could impart 2 pieces of wisdom, hopefully. How do you think about all of this at the same time? What I would say is, in your pursuit and process of social innovation, is think of yourself and your organization like you're a stranded astronaut. Right? If anybody's ever read The Martian or seen the recent movie or Apollo 13, right? What happened? Well, go back to the points. You need to be self-aware, and you need to be humble as an organization. Well, the astronaut has to be, to get back home, has to be self-aware about what they can do and what they can't do, and humble in knowing when to ask help, when to work with mission control, right? And understanding that you're not going to get everything that you need. Yeah. Apart from that, you need to make sure that you're focused on measuring the right things and keeping the end in mind, right? The point is to get back to Earth. It's not to get halfway there, right? Just like it's not that people have things, it's that they use things and they can help them to improve their lives. It's not to get just to the atmosphere, it's to get home. You need to focus on 1 or 2 things at the same time. Focus on getting home if you're the stranded astronaut. You're not going to be looking out at the stars and mapping constellations, right? You're focused on how do I get home. Obviously, you need to have a compelling story. Well, it's pretty compelling, right? What is it when people, when historically we followed the whole story of Apollo 13? It's about a human thing. It's about getting somebody back home. It's about a person and their family, right? And work with what you've got. Yeah, if anybody saw the movie Apollo 13, you remember that part? There's one where there's too much carbon monoxide, and the director of mission control says, okay, we got to figure out a way to filter out the carbon monoxide. And he says, you've got like a bottle of Tang, duct tape, and some hoses. Go do it. Right? Work with what you've got. Okay? And that helps you find out what you need, and that helps you to be creative and curious and innovate with and for communities. And the last part is I would actually correct one thing. And the critical piece is this isn't about you getting home. And that's the most important thing. It's never about you as the social innovator. It's never about your organization. It's never about your model. In order to do all of this right and do all of this correctly, it's about communities. And it's about how can we play a role in communities becoming empowered so that they can change their own lives. They can change the lives of their family members. They can change the lives of their regions, of their country. And that's what's going to help us change the world in the ways that we need to do it. So think like a stranded astronaut, but the whole point is how do we help other people get home? Thank you.